Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has quote unquote dropped out of the 2024 presidential race. Chris Graham here on Augusta Free Press, quote unquote dropped out. He dropped out and he's also not dropped out. He's Kennedy announcing today on Friday and appearing on stage Friday night with Donald Trump. He's going to be endorsing Donald Trump, but get this, he's still encouraging his supporters to vote for him. And he said at a rally today with press in the room that he still thinks it's possible he'll somehow end up in the White House. This was surreal. Um, Today in Arizona, he conceded he doesn't have a realistic path to electoral victory. This has been in the works for at least a month. He blamed relentless systematic censorship and media control, not his own missteps. Not campaigning actively for the past 6 weeks, not being able to tamp down the fallout from reports that he had sexually abused a former babysitter, and whatever that thing was with the bear in Central Park from 10 years ago. He stressed he's not terminating his 2024 campaign. Here's the quote: "I'm simply suspending it and not ending it. My name will remain on the ballot in most states. If you live in a blue state, you can vote for me without harming or helping President Trump or Vice President Harris. And in red states, the same will apply. I encourage you to vote for me." So he's trying to say, if you live in a red state or a blue state, you can vote for me. He's trying to imply border states or swing states, whatever the case may, however you want to call them, don't vote for me in those states. I guess I don't, you know. Um, so he's dropping out, but not dropping out. He's endorsing Trump and encouraging his supporters to still vote for him, and he thinks he'll be president at the end of all this. Now, I got to get to that. If enough of you do vote for me, and neither of the major party candidates win 270 votes, which is quite possible, he says. In fact, today our polling shows them tying at 269, 269. I could conceivably still end up in the White House in a contingent election. What he's getting at there is if there is an electoral college tie. It's happened once in history, and it was back before, well before any of anything close to modern voting ever got into play. The 1800 election, you might have heard about if you're a fan of the musical Hamilton. um, the House votes, and the House votes by the weird system is each state delegation gets one vote. So California gets the same number of votes as Wyoming, same number of votes as Alaska. Okay, so um, right now, and presumably after the elections, even if Democrats win control of the House, which is very likely, or very possible, I shouldn't say very likely, very possible in this election cycle. A lot of Republican states are those in the so-called flyover country where they have smaller delegations, but they get the same number of votes as California and New York, where the state delegations would have big Democratic majorities, but those big Democratic majorities just get the one vote. So it would be likely that Republicans would outnumber Democrats in terms of the state delegations. So Kennedy's idea that somehow Republican delegations would vote for him over Trump, and Trump is inviting him on the stage like he did tonight, bringing him to the stage with the Foo Fighters song "My Hero," which the Foo Fighters have confirmed on social media they did not authorize. So they're going to be sending him a bill for that. Uh, it's not going to be a light bill for playing that song. Uh, I don't know what to make of this. I'll quote a Republican strategist, Doug High, on CNN today. He mentioned Donald Trump last week standing and saying in front of a bunch of groceries, "I haven't seen any Cheerios in a long time." This wasn't Cheerios. This was cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, High said. um, and another Republican strategist on CNN, Scott Jennings, said of Kennedy that a lot of people think he's a Looney Tune, and he warned the Trump campaign to be careful with respect to Kennedy. I think a bigger issue is, the idea that these two have is that this is going to throw the election to Trump. I mean, look at the polling averages right now. And polling averages tend to include polls from 2 or 3 weeks ago, so keep that with a grain of salt. But the polling averages from Nate Silver, and then he's separate now from the 538 that he founded. He broke away from that a couple of years ago. They both have the election with Harris with a 3.5 point lead, and then uh, Kennedy was polling most recently after being near 20% early in this cycle, but last year. as high as still around 15.5% on July 1st. He's been closer to the 4% range in the last couple of days. So, but his 4%, you theoretically add that to Trump, and then you factor in, the swing states and how close elections could be there. He could throw things in Trump's direction theoretically. But just for sake of argument, pulled one poll from a group called Outward Intelligence just because they had good internals to look at. So that poll, which was wrapped up before the end of the Democratic convention, we'll see what kind of bounce Harris gets from the convention, especially her riveting speech last night. But the how Outward Intelligence poll had Harris with a 6 point lead, 50 to 44 over Trump. And then in that field, that poll had Kennedy at 5.2%, and then the other three third-party candidates each in the 0.5% range. So not much traction there for Jill Stein, Cornel West, Chase Oliver. The pollster did what pollsters are supposed to do, asked the voters who self-identified as Kennedy and other third-party voters who their second choice would be. And in the Kennedy group, it does split for Trump, but it's not nowhere near 100%. It was actually 59 to 41 in favor of Trump. If you presume that all those people still vote, which is not a fair assumption, considering he was bringing in some disaffected voters, lapsed voters, you might even want to say. It would basically bring Trump just within a point, narrow the margin by another point. So instead of a 6 point deficit in this poll, it'd be a 5 point deficit in the national polling. So it would tighten the race, but it wouldn't be the game changer that Kennedy and Trump might think. And then that's not even accounting for the Kennedy factor. We've only had because he was not polling anywhere close to the level of being able to even be a Ross Perot in this race. The Oppo research that had been done by Democrats was largely not being implemented because and being utilized because he's so far back in the polls. Why would you go scorched earth on a guy running in the 5% range? But now that he's aligned with Trump, we're already starting to see some things trickle out that are going to now be tied to Trump. And so could there be baggage that could actually drag Trump down? We'll have to see about that. I think it's very possible that that's going to be a factor to look into in this race. So Robert F. Kennedy making news, and it's not surprising. These two were caught on a call last month, right before the Republican convention, and they met at the Republican convention, and word of that got out. Actually, it was Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s son getting the word out about this, uh, and they were clearly colluding all along, and it's just now being made clear. Kennedy had started his campaign as somebody thinking he was going to run for the Democratic nomination. When that didn't gain any traction, he tried to run as independent. He was having difficulty getting on the state ballots. Um, there are a lot of pissed off volunteers who were working to help him get on those state ballots. It'd be interesting to see how they react to the dropout and endorsement of Trump on that. So, hey, if you've got comments, if you've got story tips, story ideas, anything of that nature, please feel free to email me at chris@augustafreepress.com.